The Lincolns are down below.
Welcome to Tech Tales. I'm Corbin Davenport.
I'm Mason Conrad.
Now, Mason, how do you feel about Abraham Lincoln?
Abraham Lincoln. That is not the question that I thought we were. Okay, that is okay. That's left field.
You don't think so?
Um,
We always talk about Abraham Lincoln
I
on
mean, I
tech
know every time we
podcasts.
FaceTime or whatever. Well, in general, like Abraham Lincoln's a very big topic in my life, probably as
Of
well. I'm sure.
course.
But anyway, Abe. He's an honest guy, so they say. I mean, Abe Lincoln. Yeah.
Generally in favor?
I guess so.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't. Honestly, I haven't thought about Abe. So like,
Okay.
I in history class once that ended, so did my care for Abe Lincoln.
I
So
see. Okay. All right. I have a follow up question for you.
okay, all right.
How do you feel about a robot Abraham Lincoln?
A robot Abraham Lincoln. Oh, that sounds kind of terrifying. I think. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things somebody would come up with and be like, "Hey, we should do this," and it's like, okay, just because you can, does that necessarily mean that you should? Like one of those situations.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
today we are talking about a robot Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
So, before we talk about robot Abraham Lincoln, we have to ask ourselves the question, who is Abraham Lincoln? This will be the short version because I'm not really a history person. I'm gonna try my best. There's like a million documentaries and books and other stuff about Lincoln. If you want to know everything, Lincoln was born on February 12th, 1809, in Kentucky. His family moved to Indiana in December 1816, and then again in March 1930 to Illinois when he was 21 years old. He worked as a storekeeper, a postmaster, and a surveyor in Illinois, and then he enlisted in the Black Hawk War of 1832, but he didn't do any fighting. He started practicing law in 1836, and then he moved to Springfield, which was at that point the new capital of Illinois. And over the next 2 decades, he became one of the most successful lawyers in the state. Lincoln was elected 4 times to the Illinois state legislature from 1834 to 1840 under the Whig Party. So Lincoln entered politics as kind of the main issue in the United States was slavery because the country was expanding westward and there were conflicts which sometimes became violent about whether slavery should be allowed in those new territories. The northern U.S. was becoming increasingly anti slavery, while the southern United States was becoming more fearful that slavery would be taken away because their entire economy was based around it. In 1858, Lincoln ran for senator against incumbent Stephen A. Douglas. By this time, the Whig Party that Lincoln was in had collapsed, so Lincoln was now a member of the Republican Party, while Douglas was in the Democratic Party. For anyone confused, the Republican and Democratic parties of the mid 1800s were basically the opposites of what they are today. They're not even close to the same thing. The Democratic Party was kind of more conservative, and they supported slavery or thought it should be decided by individual states. The early Republican Party was more progressive. They advocated for most of them have advocated for the abolishment of slavery, but at least like not expanding it. They also wanted to like modernize the U.S. infrastructure with railroads and factories because those were cool and new, and giving free land to farmers instead of slave owners, that kind of stuff. One thing that's interesting is that neither Lincoln nor Douglas were explicitly anti-slavery, but Lincoln insisted that slavery should not be allowed in the new territories of the United States, while Douglas thought it should be left up to the states. Lincoln lost that election to Douglas, but it got him a lot of attention nationally, so he was selected as the Republican Party candidate for the 1860 election. Lincoln won that 1860 presidential election, and shortly afterwards, the Southern slave states declared their secession from the U.S. and formed the Confederate States, which started the Civil War. As the war progressed, the full abolition of slavery became a primary goal, and in 1862, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation that legally freed all the slaves in the Confederate States. And then Lincoln won re-election as U.S. president in 1864. Civil War ended in 1865 with the defeat of the Confederate States. Skill issue, to be honest, on their part. But then on you might not know this, Mason. On April
Okay.
14th of 1865, Lincoln was assassinated.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
At the Ford's Theater in Washington by Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth. I'm sorry if that's a
Yep.
spoiler. Um,
Oh, it's okay. You're like 160 years late, so I'll manage.
okay. So, yeah, he was assassinated, but Lincoln remains one of the most popular U.S. presidents to this day for his wartime leadership, his role in ending slavery. Like you said, he had a reputation for being honest. He had a nickname, Honest Abe. So Lincoln was inspirational to a lot of people, including this other guy you might have heard of, named Walt Disney.
I don't know who that is.
Okay, well we'll learn about him.
Yep.
So Walt Disney directed the construction of the Disneyland theme park, and he planned for the park to include a Liberty Street section with several attractions portraying American history, including a Hall of Presidents. And his idea for this was like a show in Disneyland that had a 180-degree film projection with physical figures of all U.S. presidents, and there were 34 at that point, that would realistically move around and talk. Um, Now, he couldn't really do that in the 50s. We weren't
Right.
quite there yet. So that idea went on the back burner. When the Walt Disney Company was preparing to build attractions for the 1964 to 1965 New York World's Fair, that idea for the show was revived and pitched to companies as something for them to sponsor. Um, Disney pitched a version of the show without all of the president figures to several potential sponsors in 1961, including Coca-Cola, Hallmark, and Union Carbide, which was a chemical company. Disney reworked the concept to include a full-size, lifelike figure of Abraham Lincoln that would move and deliver a speech. So that maybe couldn't do like all the presidents, but they were thinking like just get Lincoln in there.
Right.
So the Walt Disney Company's first attempt at these sort of realistic robots, which are called audio animatronics, were small birds that sang songs in the Enchanted Tiki Room attraction in Disneyland that opened in June 1963, around the time Disney was pitching the Lincoln Show to sponsors. Of course, like mechanical figures that resembled humans were nothing new. Like this has been a
Right.
thing for kind of just as long as machines have been a thing, or puppets or whatever. But Disney's version was a little bit more unique. They used a combination of hydraulics and pneumatic actuators to create less jerky and more realistic movement. So, like, instead of like gears that are turning or something like that, they had like compressed air going in and out, or fluid that would like be a little bit more natural movement. By 1961, Disney's engineers created a figure that could rise from its chair, but not much more than that. I've got an article from the Emporia Gazette from January 4th of 1963. It says, quote, carrying his concept of cartoon realism to what may be its ultimate point, Disney is developing life-size electronic dolls. The prototype is a figure of Abraham Lincoln designed to recite the Gettysburg Address at Disneyland in a display to be called One Nation Under God. This, Disney says vaguely, would include figures of all the presidents who would talk to the American people and that sort of thing. The Lincoln figure operates with an intricate system of pistons geared to an electronic tape which plays the voice. The doll gestures as it talks, lips move, cheek muscles tighten, eyelids flutter, and individual fingers move. Each of the tiny facial muscles costs $600. Quote, and $600 in 1963, adjusted for
It goes a lot
inflation.
longer of a way.
Yeah, it is $6,000.
Dang.
So
That's crazy.
that's an
Yeah.
expensive Lincoln.
Yeah, definitely.
So Disney had built at least some of this Lincoln robot, right? Very expensive.
Right.
He wanted someone else to pay for it.
Right.
So that's why they were showing it to sponsors for the World's Fair. So that one of those companies could pay some of the bill. Thankfully, Disney was finally able to find a sponsor for the Lincoln Show, which was the taxpayers of the state of Illinois. So I've got an article by Paul F. Anderson from the Disney History Institute. He said, it started when the Illinois legislature passed early in 1963 a bill that established the Illinois Commission on the New York World's Fair. The commission was given the broad directive of how to illustrate and dramatize Illinois' attractions in the midst of the most sophisticated competition expected at the World's Fair. At the very first meeting of the commission, it was decided that the theme would be the land of Lincoln. Acting as a temporary chairman of the commission was Fairfax Cohn. Robert Moses, who headed the World's Fair Corporation, had General Joe Potter, the fair's executive vice president, and Martin Stone, director of the industrial section, contact Cohn regarding the Lincoln figure. Cohn later confessed that when presented with the idea, he was skeptical, yet he was willing to entertain the concept. On April 5th, 1963, Cohn arrived at the Disney Studios for a presentation of the Lincoln figure. He was suitably impressed. Upon returning to Illinois, he immediately dispatched a letter to Walt that read, quote, I'm sure you know that I was very overwhelmed by the realism of the Lincoln figure that you showed Miss Cohn and me last Friday. The possibility of our using the Lincoln figure and the effect of this upon visitors to the New York World's Fair have not yet left my mind during any of my waking hours since I saw it. I am going to New York tomorrow to discuss the Illinois participation with the fair people, and I expect to be in touch with Jack Sayers shortly to further explore this project. Quote. So this guy saw the robot Lincoln. He was like, I've been thinking about it every moment since
Been
I saw
dreaming about Lincoln
it.
himself. You go to bed thinking about him, you go to bed, wake up, boom, still Lincoln.
Still thinking about Lincoln.
That's a crazy imagine, like just real quick, cutting off for a sec. Imagine that's just like your daily thought routine. It's just Lincoln, Lincoln, Lincoln. That's crazy. To get that in like a formal email is a little bizarre.
Yeah.
Or like however that was delivered, It's like, hey, been thinking about Abe for a while. I'll get back to you on it.
Yeah. So I guess I should ask, how much do you know about the World's Fair?
The World's Fair. Are you referring? Listen, I'm so uneducated with that. I've heard of it. Beyond that, I couldn't tell you much of what it is.
It was like a giant like park that they built
Okay.
in a couple different cities. This is the one that happened in New York. I know there's also one in Chicago. There were a few other cities. It was kind of like the Olympics, right? Where it was happening every so often. A city would get it and start to build up like all these buildings and exhibits and stuff.
So is this like multiple cities at once, or is it like a pop up situation each time?
It's a pop up. So there's only
Okay.
yeah. So
Gotcha.
this one is in New York. It was going from I believe 1964 to 65.
Okay.
And basically the idea was that a bunch of like countries, states, companies, whatever would come in and they build stuff. And usually there'd be like a sponsor attached or something. So I think it was kind of funny to have a like a pop up thing in New York where like each state built its building of like, look at how cool we are. Welcome to the Illinois building. And Illinois was like, we're the Lincoln state. Let's do that.
Right. Yeah.
So, Illinois Governor Otto Kerner was reportedly impressed by the Lincoln figure, and Disney was granted funding of $1 million for it to be included at the World's Fair Illinois Pavilion. But that ended up not being enough money. So Disney had to try to convince Robert Moses, who was the guy running the World's Fair, to reduce his fees for utilities and other costs of the World's Fair to increase the budget for Lincoln. So obviously, when they built the like Illinois building at the World's Fair, they had to pay for like electricity and security and stuff. And they were hoping to do less of that so they could spend more money on Lincoln. Um, Here's a quote from Ralph Newman, the chairman of the Illinois Fair Commission. Quote, Mr. Disney and I went to see Moses, and I told him that the legislature only voted us a fixed amount of money, and that we needed his help if we were going to use Lincoln. As we were leaving, I told Moses that I was going to see Adlai Stevenson, the American ambassador to the United Nations, and call me if he wanted to reach me. I did that deliberately, figuring that it would make some impression on him. I told Mr. Disney that if Moses didn't agree to our terms, we would have participated without the Disney figure. He said he'll call you. He was right, because Moses called us at Stevenson's office and agreed to our terms. Quote. So like imagine being like the American ambassador at the United Nations and dealing with some like world security emergency meeting or something, and you get a call and someone's asking about like a Lincoln robot. You're like, what's happening here?
We have to keep the Lincoln statue. Yeah, keep Lincoln safe.
Yeah, he's like, who is this? Yeah. So this is an article in the Edwardsville Intelligencer. I think I'm saying that right. From November 21st of 1963. It reads, a controversy boiled today over whether a lifelike Abraham Lincoln figure that sits, stands, talks, and gestures is dignified and characteristic or grotesque. Walt Disney came to the land of Lincoln Tuesday to talk about the project, which will be the heart of the $1 million Illinois exhibit at the New York World's Fair. He is going to speak to you, Disney said. His voice is as close as we could get from the actual descriptions of this great man. He will appear in a very dignified setting. While seated in a chair before speaking, he will drop his head in thought, a characteristic Lincoln action, Disney said. When he is introduced, he will stand, putting his hands behind his back as though deep in thought. Disney said the Lincoln presentation would appear to audiences as, quote, as lifelike as I am standing before you, perhaps more so. He said the figure would even tap its fingers on its chair while waiting to be introduced. Disney's statements to the newsmen were in answer to criticism that the Lincoln figure would be grotesque and would resemble a carnival sideshow. One person said, it's almost as ghoulish as the idea to play a mock recording of the voices of the 4 presidents enshrined at Mount Rushmore. Another person said, the next thing they'll have the Mouseketeers giving guided tours of the White House. The Lincoln figure will be in a 12-minute presentation called Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, held in a 500-seat auditorium in the Illinois Pavilion. An estimated 25,000 persons will see the show daily. Disney, a Chicago native, said, quote, I have more at stake than this, than the state of Illinois. I am staking my reputation on this, my integrity, and I am not a carnival operator. Disney and other Illinois officials did not elaborate on some of the details, end quote.
It's crazy, right? When you first started the beginning of that, all I heard, the main jarring jump out at me statement you made is whenever they say, he will speak to you. Just like, again, imagine. Like, it's just, Abe's going to talk to you.
Whoa.
Yeah. Spooky.
Yeah, I like that article because it is such a funny thing where Disney wasn't like technically the first company to try something like this, but it was like maybe the first major use of this, I guess
Well,
you
like,
could
kinda,
say. Like very
yeah.
public use of it. Like it was at the World's Fair, which is like this big, huge event.
It's kind of a more mainstream use tactic or something.
Yeah, yeah, and of course it was like, you know, Walt Disney building this and promoting, well, not himself building it, but like him managing
Right.
it and getting everyone involved to put together this Robot Lincoln, so it was more high profile.
Maybe Robot Lincoln will help build Robot Lincoln as well.
Yeah, it's just a chain of Robot Lincolns, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like everyone being like, I don't know if it's right to have like a robot Abraham Lincoln.
See, like, I feel like that's a lot of general ethics that, I mean, not, maybe that's not the right word, but like that's a general like morality question I think a lot of people end up with is like, if you do, like, is it ethical though, I guess, to just recreate this human and make it robotic, and like, does it do justice to the original, or is it kind of just going backwards from how people knew him, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's definitely a valid discussion. It's funny because like this was the first time this really happened, so it was the first time anyone
Right.
was like immediate reactions like, I don't know if that's right.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
we have had a lot of versions of this where like, is this okay? Is it okay to have like, the one that keeps coming up now is recreating actors who have died in
Yeah.
newer
Yep.
movies with like
Yep.
CG and AI voices and stuff.
I was gonna say cloning sheep, but your comparison's better than
Well,
mine.
okay, well, I don't think this was a Lincoln clone, um,
Right. Right. Right.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
but yeah, we definitely keep having like versions of this discussion over and over again.
Just in a more different. It's a more dynamic use of technology, though. You know.
So, maybe unsurprisingly, the Lincoln robot had many technical difficulties and it wasn't actually ready for the opening day of the World's Fair. Disney actually talked about this in a 2021 episode of the Disney Plus series Behind the Attraction, where Disney engineers said that the figure kept flailing its arms and smashing the chair
No.
behind it.
No. That's crazy.
Lincoln smashed.
Say, hey, I hate the chair. Remake it.
Yeah. Historian Bill Cotter said, quote, "They would go and get him another chair, and he worked 2 or 3 days in a row. Then they would bring the press, and he'd stand up and smash the chair." So the issue with that apparently turned out to be a nearby pavilion at the fair called the Tower of Light, which shined a giant beam of light into the sky. And it created an electronic anomaly that caused Lincoln to break. Cotter said, "When they fired up this thing, the transient circuits that would go through the ground made Mr. Lincoln get feedback and he'd go crazy and smash his chair." The 1964 World's Fair officially opened for its first season on April 22nd of 1964. The Lincoln figure was shown to the public each day at the 500-seat Lincoln Theater at the Illinois Pavilion in a presentation called Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. This building had like other stuff related to Lincoln too. It had a manuscript of his Gettysburg Address speech in his own handwriting. It's kind of cool. Now, the Lincoln robot delivered a speech that was a mix of 5 different real Lincoln speeches made between 1836 and 1864. The voice recording was made by Royal Dano. Walt Disney said, quote, "He's the closest thing to Abe we can find, and he has played Lincoln many times." All right, you ready to watch the Lincoln robot, Mason?
Sure. Let's see it.
All right, hit play on 3, 2, 1, play.
Ever since I was a small boy in Illinois, I've had a great personal admiration for Abraham Lincoln. So when we decided to recreate some of the great moments in Mr. Lincoln's life for the World's Fair, we directed all our energies to that task. We wanted to bring to the people of today the inspiring words of the man who held this nation together during its moment of greatest crisis, the Civil War. Now, to recreate a truly lifelike image of Lincoln, we use our new medium of audio animatronics. To start with, we were fortunate in being able to secure this life mask of the 16th president. How do we get this, Blaine?
This is actually a copy of an original life mask by the sculptor Leonard Volk in Chicago in 1860.
Before Lincoln was president.
Before Lincoln was president.
Before he had a beard.
That's right.
Now with this to start with, our sculptor, Blaine Gibson, has been able to create this very accurate likeness of this great man. During our exhaustive research into Lincoln's life, we studied his mannerisms, his gestures, and even his voice characteristics to create a faithful likeness of this honored man. The final result is so lifelike that you might find it hard to believe. So when you visit the fair, be sure and stop by the State of Illinois Pavilion and spend a few moments with this great man.
Never had a good definition of the word liberty. The American people just now are much in want of one. We all declare for liberty, but in using the same word, we do not all mean the same thing. What constitutes the bulwark of our liberty and independence? It is not our frowning battlements, our bristling seacoasts. These are not our reliance against tyranny. Our reliance is in the love of liberty, which God has planted in our bosom. Our defense is in the preservation of the spirit which prizes liberty as the heritage of all men, in all lands, everywhere. Destroy this spirit, and you have planted the seeds of despotism around your own doors. At what point shall we expect the approach of danger? By what means shall we fortify against it? Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step the ocean and crush us at a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined could not by force take a drink from the Ohio or make a track on the Blue Ridge in a trial of 1,000 years. At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer that if it ever reaches, it must spring from amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. As a nation of free men, we must live through all times or die by suicide. Let reverence for the law be breathed by every American mother to the lisping babe that prattles on her lap. Let it be taught in the schools, in the seminaries, and in the colleges. Let it be written in primers, in spelling books and almanacs. And in short, let it become the political religion of the nation. And let the old and the young, the rich and the poor, the grave and the gay, of all sexes and tongues and colors and conditions, sacrifice unceasingly at its altars. And let us strive to deserve, as far as mortals may, the continued care of divine providence, trusting that in future national emergencies, he will not fail to provide us the instruments of safety and security. Let us have faith that right makes might. And in that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it.
What'd you think? What'd you think of Robot Lincoln?
Robot Lincoln is probably the most lifelike Lincoln I have ever seen. I didn't know this even existed till tonight, so that's interesting.
You didn't know
I feel
you
like
didn't know Lincoln existed.
no, this is all new to me. So basically, one thing I think is interesting, it's like not necessarily about the robot, but like you mentioned earlier, it kind of keeps cutting back to the kids, and they kept looking just like, should I be concerned or should I like be in awe? You know?
We'll
'Cause I think
we'll
back
get
then,
to what the kids were doing.
basically, yeah. I mean, it was in. I mean, I guess for that time, I think now today it wouldn't be as interesting because we've seen that everywhere now. It's just a really big kind of pool for situations like Disney World or whatever, like statues, animatronics, like it's just a semi-normal thing now. So, but back then, now is like probably way new to some people sitting in that audience, which is the cool part, I think. Like the awe of being in a room with a robot that kind of looks like a person. Obviously, it looks like him, but movement wise is a little bit different. But still, to feel like, hey, like for them, like that was, I mean, Abraham Lincoln obviously is a legend in history. So it's like, even back then, though, like, 1809 or whenever, that's still closer than 2020 2024 now. So going back then in the 1960s or 70s or whenever people were seeing this now, it's like it still harkens back a little bit to potentially maybe their ancestors past, like, and not that many generations that it would take ours to reach there now, you know what I mean? So it's kind of just like a cool little callback that way.
Yeah, it was only it would have been like exactly 100 years
Okay.
since the start of the Civil War, because that was 1865 is when it ended.
Right.
And this was 1964
Yeah.
to 65 World's Fair. So,
Right.
yeah.
I'm just going back from like when he was born though, because like I thought you said that was like 1809, right? Something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, it was early
Yeah, yeah.
1800s, yeah.
So anyway, just in that time frame though, yeah. No, that's cool though. I like that.
Yeah, so this video will be in the show notes if anyone wants to watch it. It is a lot, it is the initial version of what gets used at like Disney parks and a lot of other theme attraction stuff. Lincoln's not like moving a ton. He's moving his head around. It starts with him. He's like sitting in a chair and he gets up, and then at the end it sits back down.
Oh, and the chair smashing did not make the cut.
No, I that would have been really funny though. Every time they have to get a new chair.
Yeah, they have like chair suppliers waiting to reload it in between shows. They're just like building chairs backstage.
There's like the pavilion next door is like constantly like, where's our chairs? Where'd the chairs go?
Right.
Someone's stealing all the chairs.
Like, why is this tree gone?
Okay, so that's Robot Lincoln in action. I've got a picture of Robot Lincoln naked, and this will also be in the show notes.
Oh, you don't have to send me that. Oh no.
Well, he's not really naked. He's
Oh no. Okay, listen. I didn't hear you say robot. I was like,
No,
I
I'm
was
not
like,
gonna.
hold on,
I'm not gonna
really
send
don't.
you Lincoln's nudes, Mason. That's not
Right?
nice.
No, I was hoping you wouldn't. But okay. See, that looks creepy to me.
Yeah, that's 100% a robot that will kill you.
Right? Like it's the eyes. The eyes look very pinball-y inside.
Yeah,
Just chrome.
that's Lincoln after the Civil War. He's just like, I'm done.
Jeez.
I'm done with everything.
Yeah, I was like, wait, why are you sending me Lincoln's nudes? I'm concerned. How did you get those?
So, going back to the kids watching that,
Yeah.
supposedly some people thought that this was a trick, that like it was actually a person doing the speech, not a robot. So some kids apparently would shoot Lincoln with ball bearings through soda straws, and the ball bearings came from the nearby SFK Industries Pavilion.
Dude, imagine that's when he picks up the chair and just launches it at the kids. He's like, I've had it. I'm done. I'm clocking out.
He's like, Robot Lincoln doesn't get paid enough to deal with this. Robot Lincoln's going to throw a chair at you now. So, because this happened in the 60s, I wasn't able to find as many like visitor reactions to this as
Right.
I was hoping for. I wanted to see, like, especially when people earlier were complaining like, oh, this is probably going to be like gross and like maybe immoral. Like, I don't really want to see this. So there's not like a lot of good information there that I could find. This is from a newspaper called the Daily Herald. They said, quote, "The first review on the modest little entertainment New York has been putting on comes from William Wyckoffis? I don't know. Bill and Carol took the two children with them for a 9-day jaunt to the World's Fair, and they approved. Perhaps the most controversial exhibit, Walt Disney's animated Lincoln for the Illinois entry, was beautifully done and remarkably lifelike, they say. His body was most mobile, and a 15-minute oration of excerpts from 4 speeches was done in an authentic, twangy Southern Illinois voice, the lips forming the words. Quote.
Interesting.
Illinois Governor Otto Kerner received, according to him, over 100 letters by September 1964 praising the exhibit. And the Associated Press wrote an article with some of those letters. One parent said, "My daughter, who is 5.5 years old, does not know yet what kind of a man Lincoln was, but the look of fascination on her face would be worth 1,000 words." Another person from Plainview, New York said, quote, "The splendid figure of Mr. Lincoln and its beautiful background stirred my emotions and revived a feeling of patriotism that had been dormant for a long time." Quote. One person from St. Petersburg, Florida said, quote, "The Illinois exhibit stands to the front of all because thought given to personal impact and general excellent production." Quote. And then one letter that the article from the Associated Press did highlight that was kind of interesting is one person said that the Lincoln was, quote, "a colossal feat of automation," quote, but that they thought actors would have been more effective.
Interesting.
So we're back to the AI discussion.
Yeah, hey.
Generally seems like Lincoln was a hit. Based on what I could find. I think like if something had gone horrifically wrong, there probably would have been news articles about that.
Headlines would have been like Lincoln robot, a smashing success.
Lincoln smashed a kid with a chair today at the World's Fair.
That would raise eyebrows.
It would raise his eyebrows because they're articulated and lifelike.
Yes.
So, Robot Lincoln was, pretty popular, but it seems like it didn't get as much attention as the other stuff Walt Disney helped create for the World's Fair, because he also helped build this giant pavilion for General Electric called Progress Land that had a show in it called the Carousel of Progress. There was another exhibit called It's a Small World that was sponsored by Pepsi. And he also helped build the Magic Skyway, which was sponsored by Ford. And all of those were later reworked into attractions at the at Disney's theme parks. The It's a Small World ride that's like at every Disney park that was initially at the World's Fair at the same time as Robot Lincoln. And I did try looking through a lot of like archival photos and videos from the World's Fair. And a lot of those showed some of those other pavilions, but there wasn't a lot of the Illinois building or Lincoln. I did find one source that said at the Lincoln show, the audience was told not to take flash pictures, so that might be part of the reason is like there were fewer photos because people were told not to take photos in there. And most of the like photos and video you'll find of Lincoln is at one of its later appearances at the Disney parks, not the World's Fair. So in July of 1965, a year after the World's Fair started, Disneyland opened a permanent Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln show inside the town square area of Disneyland. I think this one was a different Lincoln robot than the first one, but I'm not entirely sure because by July of 1965, the World's Fair hadn't ended yet. So I don't think it was the same robot. I'm not 100% sure. It might have been Lincoln 2. And that Lincoln was the first human audio animatronic figure at a Disney park, which later became a main element of all its theme parks. Now there's like hundreds of these, thousands. The Lincoln robot has remained at Disneyland since then, kind of on and off, occasionally closing to make way for another exhibit and then coming back. And it has received show updates and newer Lincoln figures. So the Lincoln robot that's there is not the same one that was at the World's Fair. It's been like replaced a couple times. The original Illinois pavilion was demolished after the World's Fair ended, so that's not there anymore. The original robot is currently, as of when we're recording this in September 2024, is on display at the Walt Disney Presents exhibit at Disney's Hollywood Studios Park in Florida. And supposedly, I don't know if this is true, supposedly the Lincoln robot was lost. Like, just no one knew where they put Lincoln.
Dude, how does that happen?
I don't
You
know.
just lost Lincoln. He's
You
just
lo-
like,
I mean, they he's smashing chairs all alone. No one knows where he is.
how do you lose? That thing's huge.
Yeah, I mean,
He's like on Space Mountain for the rest
yeah.
of his for the battery
Yeah, they
guys.
stuck him in there. Yeah,
Wow,
that's
that's
why he lost him,
crazy.
because it's dark in there.
Dude, imagine he's like in someone's basement right now, just chilling.
Well, he's not there anymore, because they did find him and they put him at the exhibit. But yeah, he could have been
Okay.
in someone's basement. I don't know.
It's like night at the museum when the lights go off. He's like, "Oh, my shift's over. Let me go hang out with Mickey Mouse or whatever." He just didn't come back for a shift.
Smashing chairs with the mouse.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy. Imagine walking in one day and Lincoln's just gone. Like,
Yeah.
Guys.
Guys, I misplaced Lincoln. I don't know where he went.
That's insane.
They should have put an air tag on Lincoln. They forgot to do that.
What do they call the people at Disney World that are like they play the characters? They have a name for them, right?
I think if you work there, they're called like cast members.
Cast member, yeah. Quick, grab a cast member. Make sure he has a beard. That's what I.
Yeah, I'll be in his stand-in for Lincoln.
Memorize these 4 speeches. Recite them in 15 minutes. You're on in 5.
Okay, so that's Robot Lincoln. Do you have any plugs before we get out of here?
Any plugs for like myself?
Yeah.
You talking about?
Yeah, you talk about yourself.
Okay, well, I do freelance graphic design and video editing. I work with a lot of content creators on their stuff. So that's pretty much all I do. If anybody needs anything, I exist. So that's all I do.
Where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Mason Conrad without the first O, which is MASN Conrad. If they got a YouTube channel, they can, whatever. I have a YouTube channel, but or email or whatever. Like it's all. I'm easy to find. Twitter's easy, or
Good
X,
stuff.
whatever you want to call it. So yeah,
You're easy to find, unlike Robot Lincoln.
yeah, right. Hey, I won't dip out overnight and not show back up for your Reddit.
So Tech Tales is at techtalesshow.com on Blue Sky and at techtales@mas.to on Mastodon. Links to those are in the show notes. Also in the show notes are all the sources, the video, the image that Mason thought was going to be something else. Also links to support the show are down there. And
you got to call them Lincolns for this episode. The Lincolns are down below.
Yes, the Lincolns are down below.
I love
And thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your podcast feed soon.
Later.